Hello, welcome listeners to the Crime Tales from Travels podcast, the show where we highlight crimes from places we have traveled to and from, or places that we have spent a fair amount of time in, or even places that we have just passed through. And the latter is what we have for you today on this episode. We have a just passing through mini episode, if you will, from Falfurrias, Texas. I am your host, Kimberly Rotet. Before we dive in, though, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple and Spotify, and you can follow us on Instagram by searching Crime Tales from Travels. And if you're new here, thanks for tuning in. And if you're returning, an even bigger thank you for coming back to hang out. For this particular episode, as well as all of our episodes, you can find the research and the show notes for this particular podcast on our website, kroproductions.net. Today we're going to be discussing the disappearance of a woman from Falfurias, Texas. Her name was Rena Rincones. I have also learned that through some of the research that she was referred to as Rena Longoria. And why Falfurias? And that's a good question. It's a really kind of a simple answer, but quite literally, I am just passing through Falfurias, Texas as we are recording. Now, hold on, don't worry too much. I am hands-free, and I'm speaking into a microphone that's clipped to my seatbelt. My seatbelt is on. It really just looks like I'm talking on the phone, hands-free, but I'm kind of trying to tell you this story as I record this podcast. It's from the research that I did last night, and I'm just trying to recall a lot of that research. As I make my way to San Antonio on this particular day, I wanted to try to highlight one of the small Texas towns that I'm passing through on this drive. Now, this mini episode is a little bit different than some of my previous episodes. I don't have a computer in front of me, obviously. I quite literally am just driving and telling a story out loud as I'm driving. So I'm going to include the research that I read, and I did this research last night before leaving for my drive today, but all of that research will be on the show notes page on the website, kroproductions.net. Really, though, before we can dive into the story of the disappearance of Rena Rincones, I want to try to provide some context to Falfurrias, Texas itself. Falfurrias is a small town, but it is the county seat in Brooks County, Texas, here in the United States. If I'm not mistaken, the population in 2022 was around 4,400 people. At that same time, Brooks County as a whole only had just over 7,000 people living within it. Now, geographically, it's about an hour and 45 minutes north of Reynosa, Mexico, so it really is not too far from the southern border in the United States. What I most know, Falfurrias, Texas for, is the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol interior checkpoint. I pass through this at least 2 times a month on my way to San Antonio. If I'm not mistaken, it's this U.S. Customs and Border Patrol interior checkpoint that is, in fact, the biggest industry within Falfurrias itself. This particular checkpoint was opened in 1940, I believe, and as I understand it, there is some controversy surrounding it, but that might be or just need to be a conversation for a different day and a different podcast. Now, this is a cold case, and before we start, I want to be honest about something for a minute. I found myself more than a little bit discouraged and really just upset about the lack of details on this particular disappearance. I found plenty of articles, sure, but they all said the exact same thing, was honestly just not a whole lot of anything. It really just made me believe and kind of drive home the point that local authorities just simply had no idea, still have no idea, what happened to her. Rena was last seen on June 21st, 1994. She left her parents' home in Falfurrias. It is believed that Rena was traveling to her home in Fremont, Texas. So she was traveling from her parents' home to her home. Fremont, Texas is another small town in South Texas. It's only about 15 minutes north of Falfurrias. But in the source material I recall reading, it was guessed that she was traveling to Fremont because that's where her husband and her 1-year-old daughter were at. And it was only in one article, that one piece of source material that I found, that said she was driving home to see her husband and daughter. Everything else that I read just said it was presumed that she was driving from Falfurrias to Fremont. Now, at the time of her disappearance, Rena was married. She was married to her husband, and they had a 1-year-old daughter. That's another deeply frustrating point about this story. I couldn't find anything on her daughter or her husband. It was just the same context in each story. Now, that same website, that one website, is the only one that mentioned that she was definitely traveling home from her parents' house in Falfurrias to Fremont to see her husband and daughter. That same website, again, it'll be linked in the show notes. That same website said that there are some reports that say that her husband and her daughter are also unaccounted for, but I couldn't find any additional material on that either. But what we do know is this. On that day in 1994, she left her parents' home and she was never heard from again. But it wasn't until March of 1995 that she was officially reported missing. Now, you may not need to clean your ears on that. You probably heard me correctly, and it probably sticks with you too. She was reported missing 9 months later by her father. And I don't know about you, and man, I really hate to speculate, but I'm just being honest here. I have questions as to why it took 9 months to report someone as missing. How much time passed before she was, reported missing? Is it kind of a big deal? I think it also speaks, it kind of feels very logical to ask the question about what about her husband and daughter? Did they not communicate? What were these additional details? But in all fairness, that is a significant period of time to allow to pass before you finally report someone missing. Now, as it stands today, Rena is still missing, and it really seems like local authorities still have no idea where she is, and it doesn't really seem as if they have any real leads. That part from the beginning about some of the same stuff just being written in multiple articles, that remains true. In multiple pieces of source material, it noted that law enforcement simply just presume Rena to be dead. However, they also just note that while that is their presumption, they just have discovered no information leading to a body or anything else for that matter. However, the case remains on the Texas Department of Public Safety's radar as a cold case. Occasionally, additional articles have surfaced out of Austin, where the headquarters of DPS is, also out of Corpus Christi, Texas. It's a nearby city where they're still talking about her. They're talking about this case, and they're making it known that there's still a reward for information in Rena's case. At one point, DPS even increased the reward, hoping that an increase in reward would lead to someone speaking up. But that's where this case remains today, hidden on some news websites, every now and again resurfacing with some additional information, but not really garnering a whole lot of additional information or attention. I did find a Facebook group last night while doing some research, and from what I read on that, and there just isn't that much, hence kind of the mini episode while literally just passing through the Falfurias community. But that Facebook group did provide some additional details about her height and weight at the time of the disappearance, tattoos that she had, and some other helpful defining characteristics, things like that. I will definitely link that in the show notes. But if you have any information about Miss Rena Rincones or Rena Longoria, please reach out to Crime Stoppers. I will link that information in the show notes as well for the local office. Even if you don't have any information, perhaps maybe the best thing we can do right now is kind of hope for and wish for some peace for those people who have been impacted by her disappearance. I can't imagine it's easy to lose someone you love, have them nowhere to be found, and just no information coming in so many years later, and things still being such a mystery. 1994, 1995 is quite a ways ago, and there still just seems to be nothing leading authorities to any helpful information. And that is our mini episode today. If we like this particular format, these mini episodes, I can probably do these as I'm just simply telling a story whilst driving. My hands are definitely still at 10 and 2. I'm contending with a whole lot of these butterflies that are flying up against my windshield, thinking I don't have nearly enough windshield wiper cleaner fluid, but we can do more episodes like this. But thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you like this episode. Until next time, I want to encourage everyone to stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the truth can often be stranger than fiction.